Hey everybody, I'm Justin Czar with bowhunting.com, and today we've got a fun video for you. We're going to be doing a complete bow build from start to finish on a brand new Mathews V331. This is my bow that I'm going to be hunting with this fall. Custom ordered this one a couple months ago. It showed up the other day. I've been assembling all of my parts and everything I need to build this bow the way I like to set it up. I'm going to take you guys with me on the journey of everything I do to get a bow ready to go hunting this fall. All right, now before we get started, we have to give a little bit of a disclaimer here, right? If you don't know how to work on your own equipment or you're unsure of yourself or anything like that, make sure you take it to a local pro shop. We don't want anybody out there doing anything stupid or incorrect that may damage your bow or result in injury. So guys, proceed with caution if you don't know exactly how to do all of this stuff. But I will tell you, when I first started, I didn't really know everything. It was kind of just a trial and error. Figured it out, asked friends, watched YouTube videos, talked to the guys at the local shop, and eventually kind of figured out everything. So what I'm going to do here real quick before we get started, I'm going to run you through all of the supplies and tools and gear that we're going to kind of be going over with today. First thing, we've got a couple arrows. We're going to need these obviously for checking our center shot, setting our nocking point, doing some paper tuning, stuff like that. So I've got the arrows that I plan on hunting with this fall, which are Easton Axis arrows. So I've got those here. I've got a new set of cables and a string from America's Best. These are platinum, ABB platinums. As you guys can see, I like to color coordinate my stuff. I planned this out ahead of time. So I've got fluorescent yellow and silver strings along with my flow yellow fletchings on my arrows because I like everything to match. Rest and sight are both HHA. We've got a Verge, which is a standard drop-away rest. They did just come out with a new modification to the Verge in order to fit on the V3 and the Prima and the Atlas bows. The new ones for this year that have this angled roller guard right here. So they do have a version that works on these new bows now, and I'm dropping stuff all over the place, but don't worry about that. That's just a little spacer. I'm all over the place, but what are you going to do? All right, so next thing we're going to look at is a sight. So I've got an HHA Tetra here. This is the tournament edition, so it's got the dovetail. I am shooting the single pin, 19 thousandths pin is my preference. It's just what I like to shoot. They also make a 4-pin version if you're somebody that's not comfortable with the single pin. Going on to the stabilizer, we've got a dead center Verge. This is the 9-inch. Verge. I've got 5 ounces of weight on the front of this. That is subject to change depending on how this bow balances and shoots. I am going to probably experiment with a back bar later this year, so this will likely change at some point in time, but I'm just moving this essentially from my VXR onto this bow. I've also got a set of side plates here. So Mathews, when you buy your bows, it comes with the standard overmolded engage grip, which is actually a really nice grip. I mean, this is probably my favorite stock grip that Mathews has ever produced, but I do really, really like these side plates. I've been running them on my bow. You can see my VXR, I've got a set on here. I've been running these on my bows for a couple years now since they first came out, and I really just like that thinner profile. I like shooting, really off the riser is what you're doing once you get those side plates on there. So that's that. We've got a peep sight, pretty standard. Got a set of nose buttons here. It comes with a large and a small, which is pretty cool. As you can see, color coordinated to the rest of the bow. I've got some string loop material, and that's pretty much it for everything that's going to get bolted onto this bow. Now we've really got the tools that we're going to use to set everything up. What you don't see right now in the framing is going to be a bow press and a draw board. Those are going to be the 2 biggest investments for anybody that wants to set up their own equipment and really be able to change out strings and install peeps and do all that stuff on your own. It's going to be a bow press. Last Chance is the press that we're using. We've had one for many years now. I have one at home as well. I actually have the Easy Green press at home, which is more of like the lower priced model, which is great for the guy that's using it 2 or 3 times a year to set up and tinker with his bow. We have one over here, which we're going to slide down. So bow press and a draw board, those are going to be 2 of the bigger investments. You're also going to want a bow vise as well. So this is going to be able to hold the bow while we're working on it, make sure we've got everything level, give us a nice solid foundation and platform. You're going to want a set of levels. Speaking of which, I'll go over these a little bit more in depth later. Obviously, Allen keys, very, very important. We've got some serving. I've got some blue thread locker. This is one that I don't see talked about a lot when guys are working on their bows. You want to just make sure if you're going to use a thread locker, you want to use like a medium or a temporary type thread locker. You don't want the permanent stuff, right? The red stuff, do not want, because you're going to have a heck of a time getting those bolts out. You may even strip them. The blue stuff is great because it provides just enough grip so that your stuff's not going to back out, not going to get loose on you. So like your sight, your rest, things like that, your quiver bracket, any of those types of things, a little dab of blue thread locker goes a long way for those. We've got a tape measure as well. I'll show you where we're going to use that. And then of course, my release for when I need to draw back and shoot and test. So I think that's everything we've got set up. What we're going to do next is we're going to slide this out of the way. We're going to get the bow press here. We're going to press this bow. We're going to pull the string and cables off. Then we're going to go ahead and relax the bow. We're going to let all the tension off of the limbs. We're going to take it out of the press. We're going to pull the cams out so that we can get these yoke cables off because we're going to be replacing them as well. We'll put it all back together and then we'll go from there. So with these last chance presses and these Mathews bows, you just want to make sure that you're getting your fingers put into these little notches right here on these brackets on the outside of the limbs. That's actually what they're here for, because this is a beyond parallel bow, which means these limbs, especially when I compress this thing, are going to be past parallel. And without these here to catch it, it's possible this bow could slip out of the press and fall out of here while it's under tension, which is certainly not what you want. Crank this thing down. We're going to take some of the pressure off. So now our string, as we can see, is loose here. So a tip for anybody that's like a beginner, if you've never really done this before, this is your first time, let's say you went out and bought a bow press and you're going to try to build your own bow. What I used to do, and actually still do today a lot of times, I'll take my cell phone and I'll actually take pictures of everything before I take it apart, right? I think one of the biggest concerns that people have when they're working on a bow of taking it apart is like, am I going to be able to get this thing back together, right? Do I know where the string rides? Do I know which cable is which inside of this cable guard, like which passes in which direction? Just take some pictures of it with your cell phone before you take it apart. That way you've got a frame of reference. Just one of the tips that I used when I was first starting to work on a bow. Don't have to do it quite as much anymore, but still do it. So the first thing I'm going to do, take the string off. Now, when I'm replacing the strings on my bow, I always like to keep the original strings handy because you just never know what's going to happen during the season. You're out one day, you have an accident, you fall, you drop your bow, a broadhead nicks the string or a cable or something like that, and now all of a sudden you're in a world of hurt because it's November 8th and it's a Saturday or Sunday and nobody's open and now you got a bad string. Having an extra set of string, an extra string and set of cables at home can potentially be a lifesaver. So usually what I'll do with these, take them, I put them inside of a Ziploc bag, I label the bow that they came off of, so a V331, and in the tote this goes, just in case, a little bit of extra insurance. All right, so now we've got our string and our cables off. The last thing we need to do is get these yoke cables off here, but you can't get them off without actually pulling the cams off the bow. So the next thing we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and we're going to let all the tension off. We're going to actually decompress this bow, and then we're going to pull the axle. So it's always amazing to me when you take the tension off of these bows, just how much pressure is on these limbs. And you can tell when you pull this off by how big the bow gets versus what it normally looks like when the string and cables are on it. This is where a power press comes in handy. All right. So we've got our bow off, and as I said, you can see it looks a heck of a lot different now, right? When these limbs are perfectly straight and they're not past parallel because there's no pressure on the limb. So the next thing we're going to do is we're going to pull the cables off, or not the cables, the cams, I should say. We're going to pull the cams off. What I've learned over the years and the way that I do these is what you're going to see, you've got an axle that runs through the middle of this bow, or the middle of these limbs right here, and it runs through the cam, and you've got an Allen screw and a washer on either side. You really only need to pull one of these out. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to pull one of these out, and then I'm going to gently and slowly tap the axle so that it comes out the other side. I don't need to actually unscrew both of these. So I'm going to pull one out, tap it out, and pull the cam out, and then we'll get those cables, those yokes swapped out quick. You can see we've got the whole axle along with the spacer now. So now our axle is out of the bow, and now we can pull the cam out. So here's your cam. Now you can see the yoke cable runs inside of these kind of big bearings that are here. And you can see that that's offset in there, and that's actually done for a reason. That is the AVS, the heart and soul of the AVS cam system right there is this design here. So at this point, we've got our little plastic pieces we just pull out of there. I can pull this off. We'll do the next one. All right, so we've got our cable yokes replaced. We've got our cams back on the bow. We've repressed it, so we've put pressure back on the limbs. Next thing I'm going to do is actually put the cables on, and then we'll put the string on last. Now, I remember, again, back when I first started working on a lot of these bows, I was always unsure whether the top cable or the bottom cable was like longer or shorter, but in this particular instance, both cables are the exact same length, so there is no top and bottom. They're literally the same cable. As I talked about earlier, they come with a paper clip on them, so you want to try to maintain that same length. And where this is really important on these, especially these dual cam system bows, is going to be your cam timing. If you accidentally get a twist in or take a twist out of these cables, it is going to affect your cam timing. So we're going to go ahead and start with the top cable here. Now, if you were to look at these Mathews bows, they typically are going to have the cable come in this little yoke piece from underneath. Got one little strand that's off there. Go through here and back. Now this is the part where like you may get a twist in, you may actually accidentally put a twist in or take a twist out. There's not a whole lot you could do about it. This is a hard part of what we're doing here. So don't worry too much about it. You just want to get the cables in place and we'll call it good. Another tip with these ABB strings specifically in cables, what you're going to see is they completely serve the end loop of the cable, whereas the stock cable here is not served at all. It's just string material, so it's a lot more pliable and flexible. We could open that thing nice and big, whereas these ones here, they're really stiff, and a lot of times you have a hard time getting it around this post here. So what you want to do, a little trick that I have, is I take a set of needle nose pliers and I just open this up a little bit to give me that right shape, because it's kind of a teardrop shape. So it makes it a little bit easier to get it on here. Now you can also, Brad, if you want to zoom in on this, you're going to see that because of the switch weight mods and the way that these cam systems work, you've got a little arrow here that's going to show you the direction that the cable wraps around this post and then attaches to here. So that's an important thing to keep in mind. So I usually put it on the post first and then I wrap it around. So you want to follow that little arrow right there. So that's going to be kind of cable number one. You know, these yoke cables are kind of a pain to keep on during this process, but it can be done. All right, so we've got cables on the bow, cable guards back together. Now we've got our string, same deal. You want to try to not put any twists in or take any out of it. When you're looking at your string, unlike your cables, it does have a top and a bottom. The top is typically indicated by the spot that's got this little piece of serving run through the middle of the string. You know, on a string like this that's made up of two different colors, it's easy to find the center of the string because it's half yellow, half silver. If you're running a solid color string, Todd likes to run solid orange on his bows. It's hard to find the exact center, so you know that there's an even amount of strands on both sides of the peep sight. That's ultimately what that piece is there for. So that's going to be the top. This is going to be our bottom. So we're going to go ahead and lay this on here. We got to fish it through, come up through our yoke, and then attach it in. then in our track. All right, so it looks like we've got a little bit extra tension. So what I'm going to do at this point is I'm going to start letting this off just until I start seeing things tighten up a little bit, and then I'll go through and make sure everything's good before I put. So at this point, we're just starting to see things get a little bit of pressure on them. It's holding everything together at this point. All the pressure isn't on the bow yet, because at this point what I'm going to do is I'm going to run through and I'm going to check, make sure everything is good. I'm going to make sure that my yoke cables are seated properly on here on both sides. Make sure my cable's good, it's running through the cable guard properly. My cables aren't hitting each other anywhere. Make sure my string looks good. Everything is looking pretty good. On these bows with the switch weight mods, you're also going to notice that the cable kind of runs underneath the module right here. You want to make sure that it's underneath and it's in that track right there. Sometimes these strings have a tendency, if they're riding on the outside of the track like that, when you unpress it, you don't want that. You want to make sure that this string is running inside of this track, because that's what's going to take up the cable when you actually draw back. So at this point, everything is looking pretty good. I'm going to go ahead and let all the pressure off. I like to just make sure that I'm checking everything. Cables are all in the right spots as I continue to load the bow up, just to make sure there's no issues. Looks like we're good. We'll pull this bow out of there. And there we have it. Step one is done. We've got the cables swapped out. We've got a new string on here. So now we're going to start putting our accessories on here. We will get to the point where we're able to draw this bow back. We're going to use this press one more time with the draw board in it to check the cam timing, but that's a couple steps later. So for now, we're going to get the press out of here. We'll get the bench back. We'll keep working. All right, so the next thing I'm going to do is put my bow in a vise and I'm going to level it out. Now there's a lot of different levels on the market. This one here is made from a company called Van Handel, and I really like this one because it's got this spring-loaded clip on it right here that actually holds it tight onto the string. A lot of the cheaper plastic levels that just clip onto the string, depending on where you clip it on, sometimes they're a little bit loose and they have a little bit of play to them, which is exactly what you do not want when you're trying to level something out. So this is a pretty pricey little level set, but once you own it, like you have it hopefully forever, and this is the best one that I've found so far. So this is the one from Van Handel. So what we're gonna do, we put the bow in the vise. I already leveled it out both horizontally and vertically. So the next thing we're going to do is we're going to take our rest. We're going to bolt it on. This is very simple. Again, this is an HHA Vertus rest. If you're using like a Mathews, one of the QAD rests that bolts into the little dovetail, here you just kind of clamp it on there. Otherwise, you've got a single bolt that holds this into the bow. This is a universal sized bolt for those of you who have never done this before. Every rest pretty much fits on every bow out there, at least that I've ever seen. Now sometimes with these you find that they're a little bit tight, especially on this first time screwing them in. Just make sure you don't cross thread it. All right, so we've got our rest on the bow now, and that's really all you need to do. These Vertus rests have a little tab that sits actually inside the cutout right here that actually mounts it nice and flush on there, and it holds it on the bow exactly where you need it to be. So the next thing we're going to worry about is going to be our center shot. And there's a couple different ways to find center shot on a Mathews bow. Personally, for me, I just use a tape measure. Center shot on every Mathews bow that I've set up, and I've got my first Mathews like a decade ago now, almost. My Z7 Extreme was 13/16 of an inch, and every one has been exactly the same since then. So 13/16 of an inch off the inside of the riser right here is typically going to be your center shot. Now, that's the starting point for everybody. You may have to just fudge it a little bit one way or a little bit another way, and that's going to be based on how you draw and anchor. It's going to be based on your arrow. It's going to be based on a couple different things, but 13/16 is the perfect starting point. And to be honest with you guys, I rarely, if ever, have to move from there. Now, if you don't want to go by the measurement method, right? Let's say you don't want to just use a tape measure, and you do buy a set of levels from Van Handel. It's actually a pretty cool little system that they've got in place here. It comes with a small little metal piece that screws into where your stabilizer goes, right? So you're going to screw this where your stabilizer fits into right here, and that's going to be your center shot of your bow, because your stabilizer is going to be right in line with your riser and with your arrow. Then what you could do is you could take an arrow, knock it on here. So you can knock your arrow, put this on the end of it, and gravity is going to allow this to fall straight down, right? So you're going to see that this falls down. It's got a black line down the middle, and you want that line to line up with the front of this point right here. And once those two things are in line, that's your center shot. Pretty simple way to do it, pretty handy little tool. Obviously this is going to need some adjustment to get us where we want to be, because we could see when this thing stops swinging on here that we are considerably not in the correct center shot for this particular setup right now. But that's the Van Handel way of doing it. You can do the measurement way, or this is how I actually used to do it when I first started out. There's this Easy Center laser tool. So essentially what this does is this screws into the side of your bow where your sight would go, and it casts a laser straight down. And you basically adjust your bow so that this laser is lined up with the string and then straight down across your arrow. So this is a laser center shot tool as well. I haven't used one of those in a few years now. Like I said, I just go with the 13/16 off of the riser and pretty much call it good. So I'm going to actually move this bow a little bit more to the side. I'm going to re-level it out, and then we'll get our center shot taken care of. All right, so we got our rest mounted on here. We're trying to find the center shot now. We started off getting a rough measurement with the tape. We're gonna actually show you guys, for purposes of this video, we're gonna do a couple different center shot options just to show you guys kind of how all this stuff works and make sure that we got everything completely lined up. So according to our Van Handel tool here, we are a little bit off, right? When I hang it on there, looks like the arrow needs to come out a little bit, which is the exact same thing that we're seeing on our laser measurement. So the way that these laser tools work is you mount it on the bow, you turn the laser on, and you adjust it. And what you want to see, and what you can see right here, is this laser is going to travel up and down my string, right? So this means we have it adjusted perfectly so that it's riding up and down the string, and then as we turn it, it's going to ride down the arrow, and as we get out towards the end of the arrow, it's no longer on the actual arrow. It's pretty far off from the arrow right here, which means our arrow needs to get moved. Double check this. And the arrow needs to get moved in according to our Van Handel tool, which is the same thing that we're seeing on our laser tool. So those tools tell me that we've got an adjustment to make. We'll make a very minor adjustment here on the top of the rest. Start to slide this over. And the important thing that we want to do here is make sure that we run this laser as far down the end of the arrow as we can to make sure it's not trailing off the side of the arrow. I like to kind of put my hand there to make sure it's right in the middle. That actually looks pretty dang good right there. And it's just a skosh off on our Van Handel tool. You can see that we're not quite on that line. Our laser is showing that we are good all the way through. Now the one thing to watch out for, because I've fallen victim to this in the past, is when you tighten this thing down, make sure you don't move it. Make sure it doesn't slip one way or the other. I like to tighten it down and then make sure that everything is good. All right, so now we got our center shot all taken care of. You know, our bow is obviously still level. What you'll see is I did tie on just a real quick nock set because I wanted to stop this nock from sliding as we were finding our center shot. And I went ahead and just kind of leveled this thing up. So again, we're gonna use the same leveling tool. You want your arrow to be perfectly level. If anything, just a skosh nock high. Like when I set mine, I like to set the bubble kind of right at this back line right here. So it's level, but maybe just a skosh nock high. I personally like to set up my bows, and the folks at Mathews have always told me to set them up passing right through the burger hole. So basically you can see this hole back here where your rest mounts, that's referred to as the burger hole. So I've always set my arrow up to pass directly through the middle of it. So when I'm looking level at my arrow, everything's looking pretty good right there. So I'm gonna call this good. I prefer, now when I'm tying my nock sets in, I do like to tie a nock set above and below. I know some guys only like to tie below. Most people don't only do above. It's either below only or above and below. I prefer to do above and below, both. And the thing is, you want to try to make sure that you're not tying these so tight that you're getting nock pinch. And there's a million different ways to tie these. You could do some half hitch knots, you can do a basic overhand knot or a double overhand knot. It's really up to you. I just do a quick little kind of like a double half hitch here. I've already tied a couple in. I don't tie these very big, maybe 3-4 times around, something like that. It's maybe a little bit more than 1/8 of an inch thick. That's really all I'm doing for mine. I'll go ahead. I usually finish this off with a double overhand knot, and then I burn it so it doesn't move on me. So get that nice and tight, get our heater out. Now a lot of guys will actually, at this point, they will take and put their bow back in a press so that it's actually being held down, because what you don't want to do is burn your string and or cables doing this. Don't ask me how I know that. I may or may not have done that in my life. So we're going to push this thing down. Actually, this table kind of comes in handy right here. So we're going to go like this because we want our flame to be going up and away from our string. Take this level off, at least for right now. I usually just burn those right down, press them down, and now we're good. Now, in order to get that second nock set, actually, I am going to move this table. So now we've got our top nock in place. We're going to go ahead and put the bottom one in. So I'm going to do the same thing. And again, you don't want to get this super tight into your nock. You want to try to leave just a little bit of space in there. I don't know that there's really a wrong way to tie on like a serving type of nock set like this, because I've seen guys do it literally a million different ways. As long as it does the job and it doesn't come untied on you, I'm not sure you can really screw this up. All right, well, we've got our nock sets tied on the string, and in the past, the next thing that I would do was tie my string loop on. And in fact, that's what I started to do, and I was like, wait a minute, this is a mistake that I always make, and I ended up paying for it in the end. Before I put my string loop on, I really want to put my peep sight on. And the reason for that is when you put your peep sight in here, it's actually going to turn your string a little bit because you're separating the strands and you're changing the length of the string. So what inevitably happens is I put my D loop on, then I put my peep sight on, and the two don't align. By the time I get my peep sight where I need it to be, and I'm feeling good, those two things are out of line. I end up having to cut the D loop off and put a new one on. Not that it's a huge deal, but I've found in the past when I do it this way, I have a little bit better success, just a little bit of an easier process. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put the bow back in the press, obviously, take some tension off the string, and I'm going to put the peep sight in. Now, in my particular case, I always kind of forget where exactly do I put my peep sight up here so that it's going to work for my eye. Now, I'm fortunate enough to have a bow here that I've been shooting for the last year that's set up really well for me. This is my VXR. It's a 31.5 inch, so it's darn near the same geometry of this bow. It's going to have a very similar string angle. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to measure approximately the distance from where the peep sight is to where my top tied in nocking point is right there. And that's going to give me a basis of where I should put my peep sight on this bow. It's something that just helps me get a lot closer on that first try, so I don't have to draw it back and press it and draw it back and press it and keep moving this thing until I get it where I want it. So we're looking at about 6 1/4. which is pretty accurate. I'm usually somewhere between 6 and 6 1/4 for me when I set up a bow, depending on axle to axle length and the string angle and whatnot. So 6 1/4 is where we want to be. So what I'm going to do is move this thing actually up so you can see this thing is tied in at just about 4 inches is where it's at, and we need it to be 6 1/4. So I need to get that thing way up here. We're going to start sliding this sucker up and around the string until I get it where I want it roughly to be. It's probably just a little high. All right, so it's going to be right about there is where I want that sucker to be at. Okay. I'm going to take a little bit more pressure off of this. I know that some companies sell these tools that you can jam in there and then push it sideways to try to spread that out and get your peep in. I've never had good luck with those. In fact, I'm always worried about them cutting my string. Your best case scenario is always just to separate your strands and put your peep sight in. So I like to leave this piece actually in here until I get my peep completely set where I want it. I just feel like it helps me in the event that I need to take it out, twist something, do something else, to have that little thing in there. Now this is always the fun part, right? Trying to figure out exactly the right angle, especially since I only do this a couple times a year. And yes, I have definitely installed peep sights backwards in my life. I'm not ashamed to admit. Now you're gonna see, you know, right now this peep is pretty good, right? It's facing up. It should be all right for me to see through it. But you're going to notice once I start letting the pressure on the bow, see how I twisted it over like that? That's a pretty common thing that you're going to see. And part of the reason that now I can tie my string loop on, and what I like to do, at least in the beginning, there's almost never a time when I'm setting up a bow that I don't have to put multiple string loops on it by the time it's all said and done, usually 2 or 3. But in this particular case, you know, this string just happens to fall right there. Now what I can do is I can press this bow one more time and actually can put a half of a twist into the string or out of the string, whichever way I want to go. In this particular case, I'd probably want to take a half of a twist out, and that may get me to where I want to go. But if it's still just a little bit off, what I'll do is I'll actually tie my string loop at a little bit of an angle. Not much. I mean, you don't want to certainly overcompensate and having both these things facing the wrong direction. But if it's just that little bit off, something like that, and it's just kind of causing you some grief, you can do one of two things: a twist in or twist out of the cable or the string, depending on where you want to go, or you could just tie your string loop at a little bit of an angle. That way, when you pull it back, it straightens this whole thing out. This thing's about a half a twist off right now, so I'm going to go ahead and just press it, and I'm going to take a half a twist out of the top of this string. All right, so that looks much better now. So you can see our peep is lined up. It's facing me the way that I need it to be. We're going to leave that in there for a little bit longer. So at this point, I could potentially tie the string loop in here. I like to tie it when it's vertical on the bow vise. I just want to check this one more time. We're right at 6 1/4, so that's looking good. So I'm going to take this out of the press, put it back in the vise. We'll get a string loop tied on it next. All right, so we got everything back in here. We know that we got our peep lined up exactly where we want it to be. So I'm going to tie this string loop coming kind of straight back at me. Again, I'm not going to go through the whole tutorial on how to tie a string loop. I think there's a lot of those out there. Hopefully you guys know how to do it by this point in time. Now, I am probably going to retie this string loop with a brighter color. So I typically keep a couple different colors, and if you guys know me by now, I like the color coordination, so I'm probably going to go with this string loop in the end, but chances are I'm going to have to retie this thing at some point in time when I'm tuning. So if I have any issues where I need to move my nock up or down, if I need to move this because it's not right in line with my peep or something like that, chances are I'm going to tie on another string loop. So I usually start with this black material first, and then I'll swap it out for some sort of brighter color. I like the brighter colors because when it's dark out and you're trying to hook your release on there, I want to be able to see it. So that's my reasoning anyways. So I like to tie my loops pretty much as short as I can get them on the bow right here. So you're going to see this thing is like basically inside my nock. I'm going to pull this thing tight. And I know it looks like you're never going to be able to shoot that, but once this thing stretches out, you'll be amazed at how much this material actually stretches out. You want to leave enough in there that you could still burn it. Burn it down. Fortunately, because we're already vertical, my flame's going up this way, I don't have to really worry about burning anything, although it seems like we're running out of gas on this. Now this is the point where I would normally use my D-loop pliers to pull this thing tight, but Todd took them home, so we don't have them here. So we're going to do the old backup plan, needle nose pliers. I think this is the way people did it for years. Probably still do it this way, I would imagine. Now this is where I do sometimes go wrong, and then I get in here and I'm trying to shove these things in here, and it starts moving the string loop to the side, and then I pull it tight and I realize that it's not in line with my peep. So just be careful when you're doing this and you start pulling that everything is in line, because this is going to dictate whether you can actually see out your peep sight or not, which is a relatively important piece of shooting a bow. So there we go. That thing is nice and tight. It's sunk in there. I can get it tighter with my other pliers. If I was at home and I had my own stuff, I got my own pliers. The office ones Todd took, and I saw them in his box the other day when we were doing a photo shoot. I don't even know that Todd knows how to tie a loop on a bow. Why do you need D-loop pliers? I don't know. Maybe he just wants to look cool. But anyways, that's going to stretch out even more once I get my actual release on it. That's actually not too bad. There we go. Nice short little D-loop. Looks like it's pretty well in line with my peep. So at this point, rest is on, center shot set, it's leveled, peep is in. My next thing that I really need to do is just draw back and make sure that my peep sight is at the correct height. That's why I haven't tied it in yet. So we'll do that real quick. All right, we got our D-loop on, we got our peep on. The next thing that I want to do, really before I lock this peep in and say that it's good, I want to go ahead and mount my sight on here. Because when I look through that peep, I want to make sure that I can actually see my sight. It's the best way to actually tell what you're doing. So let's grab the sight. All right, so we've got our sight. As you guys see, I'm shooting this HHA. It's the Tournament Edition Tetra, which means it has the dovetail. So I'm going to go ahead and screw the dovetail mount on the bow. But as I was showing you guys earlier, I'm going to use just a little drop. I mean, one little drop of blue thread locker on each one of these, because I'm not planning on taking this thing off anytime soon. That's just going to ensure that this thing does not rattle around or come loose on me out in the woods. There's nothing worse than shooting your bow and the thing's rattling and you're trying to figure out where's that rattle coming from. All right, so the peep looked great actually. I was surprised I didn't have to move it literally at all. That's the benefits of going from a very similar bow to a new bow and taking those measurements. Sometimes you just get it right on the first shot. So I'm gonna go ahead and my next thing I like to do is kind of temporarily tie the peep in, because I'm gonna have to do some shooting here pretty soon. I'm not gonna fully tie the peep in just in case anything moves and I need to change it. Once I get this thing fully tied in and locked down to the point where it's not gonna move, I don't wanna have to undo it. So usually what I'm gonna do is I'm just gonna take some serving and I'm just gonna do a couple strands around the outside right in that channel with a couple overhand knots just to hold it in place. Again, temporarily, I just don't want it to fly out when I shoot. I've shot plenty of bows with the strings not, or the peep I should say, not tied in and lived to see another day, but certainly not the brightest thing in the world, especially when it's so easy to just literally tie a couple overhand knots just to temporarily lock this thing in place or secure it so it's not going to fly out of the bow. It's not going to damage my string, take out my eyeballs. God knows what it could potentially do to me. Another nice thing about doing that is it does allow you a little bit of flexibility because it's not super locked in place. So you can slide it up a little bit, slide it down a little bit if you really, really needed to. Good enough. All right, those are both in there. All right, so peeps temporarily tied in. Next thing I need to do is I need to secure the cord for my drop away rest. A lot of bows come with clamps or things that you can use to actually just clamp it right onto your cable. For me personally, I like to just thread it through the actual cable itself. So you want to make sure that you're going to thread it through the downward cable. So we want this to get pulled down. So the easiest way to do that is to just look at the cable that's actually connected to your bottom cam. Because as you draw back, this mod right here is going to take this cable up and it's going to pull. This cable here is going to get pulled down. The other one's going to go up. So what I usually do is I press the bow just to take some stress off of the cables. You can see I've already burned the end of this cable because just like any of this stuff, I don't want it to pull back through once I'm done with it. So I want to try to keep this on the outside, or I guess you would call this the inside of the cable. Thread it right through the middle. Put it in there and it's not going to go anywhere. I will eventually tie this in as well, just for a little bit of extra peace of mind, although I don't really think it's necessary, to be completely honest with you. There's not a ton of like lateral stress that would pull this out. It's pulling more up than anything, but because it's pulling up against where it's served right here, it's not going to go anywhere even if you don't tie it in. But like I said, I like to tie it in just for a little bit of peace of mind. The guys at ABB say it the best: peace of mind is priceless, especially when you're bow hunting. You just don't want anything to go wrong out in the field, and having something like this pop out of here when you're out in the field would kind of suck. So we got pressure back on there. We're going to take another piece of serving. Basically just going to tie this thing in here the same exact way that I tied in my nock sets. It's always a chore with my fat fingers. As us dads like to say, that's not going anywhere. I think is that a dad joke? Is that a dad thing? I feel like I see these memes all over now. Like every dad, when he straps something down on his truck, has to grab it and say, that's not going anywhere. All right, guys, well, at this point, the bow's pretty well ready to go to start shooting and start tuning. So what I'm going to do, I don't have a draw board hooked up here today. Normally what I would do, especially if I'm by myself, I'm going to put this bow in a draw board and I'm going to check the exact cam timing, which I'm still probably going to do when I get home tonight, just to be sure. But on these Mathews bows, they actually have timing marks. And you're going to see a small circle in the top cam and one in the bottom cam. And these are put there strategically so that the cable should run right through the middle of that hole, both top and bottom. And if it runs through the middle of that hole, it indicates that your cams are in time. Now, it's not always a precise exact science, but it's pretty dang close. And as you can see, that's really about as good as it gets. I'll be honest with you guys. I'm amazed they look as good as they do. Usually I have to put a twist in or a twist out of my cables when I'm building a new bow, because I'm usually pretty bad about accidentally twisting stuff when I'm all setting it up. But this one looks about as good as it can get. So all I'm really going to do is I'm going to just draw back real quick. I'm going to have Brad, who's behind the camera, just give a look in there, make sure that my cable stops. So you can see your cable stop right here. It's attached to your module. It should come all the way around, go on the inside of this yoke, and then it's actually going to stop against this cable right here. So it's going to wind up and it's going to stop against the cable, and the top and bottom cable stops should be hitting at the same time. They should both be impacting the cables at the same time, and if they're not, your cams are going to be out of time and your bow is not going to shoot right, your arrow's not going to fly correctly if that's the case. So Brad's going to set that camera down. I'm going to draw back real quick. He's going to give it a look and we'll go from there. Everything feels pretty good. I'll check it on the draw board tonight, but man, I tell you what, everything looks and feels about as good as it's going to get in terms of just that very basic checking the cam timing. So with that out of the way, really, I guess the last thing we still need to do is I do need to time this drop away rest. I had this rest on another bow earlier, and I had it set up and I thought it was pretty good. Normally I would check that on a draw board as well, just to make sure that that rest is coming up that last little bit right before you get to full draw. But on these HHA rests, you've got these little witness marks right here. So you basically have a little dimple there and a little dimple there. And what should happen when you draw back is those witness marks should line up with one another, right like that, right at about the last inch or so of your draw length. That's how you know that your rest is coming up at the proper time. And you can usually look and figure that out pretty well on your own. Typically what you would do in this particular instance, if you're setting up a new rest, I think this one's going to be good to go because I had it on another bow earlier, but what you would do is, well, let's just show everybody. What am I thinking here? We'll just show you guys exactly how to do this. So you're going to just loosen up this little clamp here that holds the rope, okay? You're going to pull it tight like this, okay? So what's going to happen is, because this is loose, when I draw back my bow with wherever I put my release, where do I keep putting my release? Do you guys ever do that? Just can never find your dang release? Didn't I just have it? Is it up here?
It's on your bow.
See? I told you guys, this is what happens when you turn 40. All right, so we're going to pull this through like that. We're going to draw the bow back, and it's going to pull that cord through. Okay? So now that it's pulled the cord through, I'm going to go ahead and let down. And then what I want to do from there is I want to shorten that cord up. About 1/4 of an inch is usually where I like to go. And then I'm going to go ahead and tighten this thing down. Oddly enough, it looks like it's pretty much in the exact same spot it was at before when I set it up. Now, because I can see these witness marks when I draw back, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to keep an eye on them. They are lined up. Yeah, that looks pretty good. Yeah, it's looking pretty good. So those witness marks are lining up right as I come to full draw, which you could see on this particular rest. What it's doing is it's just pulling it up right like that. So the rest normally sits like this when you're walking around, stalking in a tree, whatever, and right at that last inch of draw length, boop, it's bringing it back to here, and then when I shoot, it's going to go ahead and fall away. So rest timing is looking pretty good. Again, this is something I would typically fine-tune on a draw board. This is a perfectly fine system for getting it rough here. And if you shoot and you find that you're having clearance issues with your fletching, or it's not falling away in time, you just adjust the length of that cord. All right, so what do we got? Rest, sight, peep, D-loop, check, 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 check. Last thing we gotta do is throw a stabilizer on it, change the grip out, and then we'll get to shooting. So let's roll the bench back over and get this sucker finished up. All right, guys, last couple items, and we're going to get to shooting. So stabilizer. So again, I'm shooting a dead center Verge. They actually came out with a really neat, like a V2 system, which is a version 2 system of the Verge. I think they call it the Light for 2021. It's a little bit lighter. It's a front and back bar combo. I'm probably going to switch over to that. It's actually what you could see. This isn't the Verge, but it's a similar system to this. So this is another V331 with that front and back bar. I'm probably going to be switching over to something similar to that here pretty soon, just trying it out this summer. You know, I've had really good luck with just, you know, the standard front stabilizer, but I'm going to show you something I really like about this Verge, and a lot of it is just because I'm so detail oriented with my gear, right? Everything's color coordinated. I go through all this crazy process. Well, you ever notice you get a stabilizer, you screw it into the bow, and depending on how that bushing is threaded into your bow, like this thing now, like is completely off kilter, right? I can't like, you can't read it, that the front's not correct. This Verge is great because they actually have little set screws. If I can find it, there it is. Got a little set screw right here where I can loosen that up. Oh, look at that, and that sucker is right where it needs to be now. And you can actually do the same thing in the back. There's a stud underneath here that is held in by a set screw as well. So I could take, looks like it's a different size Allen key. I can loosen this up and actually move that as well. So I can get everything lined up. Now in this particular case, I actually have to unscrew the bar and change the length of the stud in order to get the logo to line up properly, which I will do at some point. Otherwise it'll drive me insane that the logo isn't completely on the side of the bow. But this stabilizer was set up for my VXR, and obviously the bushing is at a little bit of a different spot. So it does allow you to adjust the position of it, adjust this front so you're getting maximum benefit out of the vibration reducing up front. Of course, you could take this entire thing off and then you can add more weights up front as needed. This is a 9-inch bar with 5 ounces of weight out front plus the added weight of the vibration dampening. So that is that. The last thing I'm going to do, I think, maybe not the last thing, second to last thing is I'm going to pull this grip off of here and I'm going to put the side plates on. I did a video on replacing this grip with the side plates a year or two ago. It's about as easy as it gets. You just peel this off. It's got some adhesive on here that you can literally just rub off with your hands. You don't need anything special. You can just come in here with your hands and get this stuff off of here. You want to get all that adhesive off of there before you put your side plates on. Your side plates are going to come with their own adhesive. This is literally about a 2-minute job. And it makes, in my opinion, a world of difference. I just love the way those side plates feel. So you can see it's just this kind of gummy adhesive. It's not quite as important to get everything off the inside or the outside of the riser here because your side plate's going to cover that up. You just want to make sure you get everything off the back here, which is where your hand's going to sit when you're actually shooting the bow. So there's that garbage. Open up our side plates here. Get a little alcohol wipe. Can never be too safe. Make sure everything sticks properly. Wipe this down. Peel off your white side first. There we go. And that is officially it for the grip. Oh, that feels better. That's better. All right, guys. Well, there you have it. The bow build for this V3 is just about done. I have one last thing to do, but we're darn near about out of time for today. We got to get heading home, but I am going to put a nose button on this thing. Did a review on this product last year, so I'm not going to go into a ton of detail. If you haven't seen them already, make sure you check them out. I think they're a really cool product. As you can see, I ordered one that color matches with my bow. The cool thing is when you order these nose buttons, they come with both a large and a small version, depending on what you like. The large seems to suit me pretty well, so I'm going to bring this home tonight. I'm going to get a nose button put on it. I am going to put it on my draw board at home just to make sure cam timing is good and rest timing is good. And then the bow build will be complete, and then we're going to move into tuning. So we will be back with a second video on tuning this particular bow. We're going to do some very basic paper tuning just to show you guys how to do that, and provided that looks good, my next step will be to get out in the range and do a little bit of downrange shooting on it. But if I do say so, she turned out pretty dang well. You know, it's important that your bow shoots good, but it's also important that it looks good, right? Like, let's not lie to ourselves. We want our stuff to look nice, and I've got to tell you, this is probably one of the sharper looking bows that I've built in quite a while. I really love this camo riser, black limb combo. Accessories are on point. Everything is looking good. So hope you guys enjoyed this. If you have any questions, comments, concerns, or feedback, be sure to leave those below. We will do our best to respond to everybody. Hope you enjoyed the video. Stay safe out there. And as we always say, bow hunt or die, baby.